So, hello everyone. My name is Alice. I am the communications coordinator here at Wild Bird Trust, and yeah, I'm really excited to welcome you all to our Intro to Birding workshop. I'm really excited for this. And so, leading our workshop today will be Caroline Biel. She's originally from Ontario, but she has moved here to Vancouver to work with Birds Canada. She is a very talented birder. But not only that, she's also a photographer and artist. And so her dedication for birds has earned her the title of American Birding Association's Young Birder of the Year award, which she won in 2016. But most of all, Caroline is an aspiring teacher. She loves teaching, and she really enjoys sharing her passion for nature with others. And so that's why I'm really, really excited for her to teach us all about birding today, teach us all about the birds. Yeah, and I hope you guys enjoy. And I'll pass it over to Caroline.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so thank you for having me. I am Caroline, and it's true, I am originally from Ontario, and the birds here are much different than on the East Coast. But I have to say that BC birds are just incredible. There are so many hundreds of species that you can see here. And yeah, a lot of them are so incredible, and I'm so excited to share them with you. Yeah, so I'm glad to hear from all of you. Thank you for putting in your name and your favorite bird. I am not sure what my favorite bird is. I think right now it's probably the pileated woodpecker. I've seen a lot of them recently, and they are just incredible giant birds. Yeah, and so I think if you have any questions as I go, feel free to pop it in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat. So if anything comes up as I'm talking, just feel free to ask the question, and I'll try and address it whenever I have a chance. Awesome. So before I start, I'll just tell you a little bit about Birds Canada. We are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to be the voice for Canada's birds. We try to achieve this through bird research, on-the-ground conservation action, innovative partnerships, and education. And so we do actually a lot of work in the Fraser Estuary. And if you'd like to learn more about us, feel free to check out our website. Just type into Google Birds Canada, and I'm sure you'll find us. And so, yeah, I think this question comes up a lot. I have been a birder since a very, very young age. Since about grade 1, I've been birding actually, and I often get the question like, Caroline, why are you so interested in birds? Why birding? And to that, I always answer, you know, birding is like a treasure hunt. And, you know, it's kind of like Pokemon, where you just try and catch them all. And it's just, it's a very fun hobby, and kind of, there are hundreds of them out there to see. And it's fun to, you know, pursue each of them and try and see each of them. So yeah, I think it's a very exciting hobby that just shows you how a whole other side to the natural world. And I think we're very lucky into the Salish Sea.
I don't know what you're doing.
And I'll just mention that if you have your microphone on, then there's an option to turn it off, and that way your audio won't come through. And so, yeah, this makes the Vancouver area a very rich area for bird life, and we have a lot of different habitats here. Where you can just see a really great diversity of birds. We have the shorelines, we have the ocean, we have the mountains, we have, you know, deep forest, we have farmland, and that, yeah, and so we can see a really great diversity of birds here. And I'll just also mention that the Fraser Estuary is designated, it's internationally known as a really great spot for watching shorebirds, for watching raptors, for watching snow geese, and a bunch of other waterfowl. We have, you know, over the winter and during migration, you know, hundreds of thousands of birds passing through here. So we are in a very special place to watch birds. Yeah, and as I mentioned, a bunch of different habitats. And yeah, birding is really something that you can do any time of the year. There are times where it's more productive than others. So during the summertime, it's usually a little bit of a lull because all of the birds are breeding, and they're usually really secretive because they're trying to keep their nests hidden and safe from predators. And so yeah, they'll tend to be a little bit more secretive during the summertime. But any other time of the year is really, really hopping with birds, especially in this area. In fall and spring, you have birds migrating through, and you can see really, really great diversity then. And even during the winter, you know, you can see so many different kinds of birds wintering in this area that, yeah, it's almost any time is a really good time to go watch birds. And so I'll move on now to identifying birds and how to get started with identifying birds. It can be a little overwhelming sometimes because, you know, if you flip open a field guide, such as, you know, Sibley Guide to Birds, you know, sometimes you're met with just, you know, so much diversity and so many bird species, and it's sometimes hard to know where to start with identifying a bird that you're unfamiliar with. So I'll just kind of walk through a few strategies that are really good for getting started on, you know, narrowing down, okay, what is this bird? And 4 keys that we can use to identify birds are size and shape, color pattern, behavior, and habitat. So I'll start with size and shape. And here we have 2 different kinds of cormorants that you can see in this area. And both of them are fairly similar looking. Both of them are you know, have black plumage and tend to be in the water. But there is some clues with size and shape that you can use to differentiate them. So in the top right, we have the pelagic cormorant, which is actually quite a bit smaller than the double-crested cormorant that we have here on the left. The pelagic cormorant also tends to be kind of smaller and lankier, whereas the double-crested cormorant tends to be a little bit more chunky. So that's a good one to look out for. And let me go on to the next one. Oh, there we go. Color pattern. Yeah, so when you have swallows, for example, a lot of them are fairly similar in shape. But one great way you can tell them apart is the obvious one, by color pattern. So that's the one that most of us kind of, one of the hints that most of us gravitate to right away. What color is it? But I would say that actually looking at behavior is also another really, really great way to help narrow down what bird you're looking at. There are some similar looking birds that can be tricky to identify, but by looking at their behavior and observing, okay, are they, you know, flying loop-de-loops in the sky, or are they, you know, sitting at the top of the tree, or are they hiding in the bushes? By picking up on these clues, we can also, that can help us figure out what we're looking at. And then of course habitat, paying attention to, are we in a meadow, or are we in a marsh, or in a forest, or at the top of the mountain? That is a really great way to help us narrow down what we're looking at as well. And so, yeah, and I think shape, out of all of them, shape is, I would say, the most important, because that can help us narrow down right away what family of birds we're looking at. Yeah, so for example, like once you get to know the shape of and the overall look of a chickadee, you can start, yeah, you can start, whenever you see a bird that looks like a chickadee, you can automatically kind of go to that section and look, okay, what kind of chickadee is it? So kind of having this idea of what each bird family looks like is a great way to, is a great first step. All right, so I have a little bit of a bird quiz here, and there's absolutely no pressure. Even if you do not know the exact species, just put in your guess, even if it's, you know, oh, that's like you know, an eagle maybe, or oh, that's a falcon. It's okay. I'm just really curious to hear yeah, what you know, and just walk through the steps towards identifying each of these birds. And so I purposely put in a mix of more well-known species and some more obscure species. And yeah, and it's okay if you don't know all of them, because it's meant to be tricky. And if you do know all of them, then props to you. Awesome. Okay, so we already have a bunch of responses coming in. So we have Jas saying oyster catcher, and that's right. The one on the top left is a black oyster catcher, which is a very, very cool species that you can see on the shore. Mallard, that's right. We have a mallard on the bottom left. Yep, Scott got it right. Jas got it right. No shoveler, actually. Shoveler tends to, I'm not sure if you were referring to the bird on the top right, on the bottom, or the bottom left. Shoveler also, the male shoveler, will also have a greenish head, but their beaks look pretty different. So that's just by looking at beak shape, that's one way to tell shoveler apart from the others. Yeah, and then the cormorant that we have on the bottom right is actually not quite a double-crested cormorant. This one is, hang on, let me move this. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a technical trouble. But anyhow, yeah, so this one is a pelagic cormorant, and you can tell also by the two white patches on its bum. The double-crested cormorant does not have those white patches. Acis 1, oh, good job. Yes, oyster catcher, harlequin duck, that's right. So the harlequin duck is the super, super colorful blue one in the top right, and they are absolutely beautiful. You can usually see them on the shoreline, and yeah, they're awesome birds to see. Yeah, and I have a question here. What does pelagic mean? And that is a very good question. I actually didn't know what pelagic meant until I went on my first pelagic trip, which is, it just essentially means far off on the ocean, like offshore. And a lot of people actually say that the pelagic cormorant is actually not named right, because the pelagic cormorant will actually not spend that much time really, really far off on the ocean. It'll actually spend time usually within a few kilometers of the shoreline. So it's not technically pelagic, but there are some, you know, really far off ocean birds that we can call pelagic, like albatrosses, we can call them pelagic, or shearwaters and petrels are pelagic because they're way off in the sea. Awesome. Okay, let us go on to the next one. Here are some more birds. Oh, okay, responses coming in. We have, okay, Jana and Evelyn, they say blue heron and the western kingfisher. That's right, so we have, yeah, in the top left, we have the great blue heron. And I was hoping that this photo in the tree would throw you off a little bit, because we tend to think of herons that, you know, sit in ponds or on the shoreline, but actually they nest in trees and will actually spend quite a bit of time perching in trees. And I'm not sure if you know about this, but I guess if you live in Vancouver, then you'll know that in Stanley Park, there's actually a really awesome colony of great blue herons nesting just above the tennis courts. And that's a really, really great place to see great blue herons up close in the trees. Yeah, so that's a great blue heron, awesome. I got a question here, are puffins pelagic? Yes, I would call puffins pelagic, yeah. They spend most of their life out on the sea and will actually only come to land pretty much to breed and to, you know, lay their eggs and have children. Yeah, great blue herons, yes, we have crow on the bottom right. We used to have two species of crows, northwestern crow and American crow, but scientists recently decided that we actually think that they're one species. So now northwestern crow does not exist anymore, and all of the crows that we see are now called American crows. Yeah, and that change was just done recently. So yeah, and then we have, yeah, that's right, we have the kingfisher on the bottom left. If you've ever seen them dive for fish, oh, it's a spectacle. They are quite talented. And then on the, yep, we have a lot of really great answers. I got one answer, which is the crow, one guess of the raven. Ravens tend to be quite a bit bigger than crows, and they'll have, you know, bigger bills, and you can also tell them apart by their tail shape. So ravens will have this kind of this diamond-shaped tail with kind of, or like a kite-shaped tail with a point at the end, whereas crows will have a pretty flat tail at the end, or more of a rounded shape to the end of their tail. And I guess another way to tell ravens and crows apart is by their voice. So crows will have a pretty high-pitched caw, caw, whereas ravens will be very, very deep and throaty. Caw, caw. I'm not doing that exactly right, but that's also one of the differences between them. Yeah, and yeah, and the bird on the top right is actually meant to be a little bit trickier. It's one of those birds that, it's one of those birds that's less well known because they are hard to see, because they tend to spend more time further away from the shore. But this one is a pigeon guillemot, and they are quite adorable birds, but you really need to see them properly. You really need a good pair of binoculars or like a spotting scope and to look out onto the water. Yeah. And oh yeah, Jess says Scotland is the place for puffins. That's right. There are a lot of puffins in Scotland as well. Do you have puffins in your area that you can see from the shore? That's actually a good question. I'm not quite sure where's the best place to see puffins in BC. I know that, maybe Alice, if you know the answer to this, you can jump in, but I know that there are this set of islands, the Scott Islands, that are just northwest of Vancouver Island that have, you know, huge, huge seabird colonies where you can see a ton of, you know, different seabirds, including tufted puffins. But it's not super accessible to human beings. So I'm not sure if there are any accessible places to actually see puffins. Alice, do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, so yeah, not really accessible places, but we do have them in BC on nesting on various islands, and you can also take, yeah, a pelagic trip or something, and you'll probably see them out off the coast of Vancouver Island.
Yeah, yeah. And pelagics are really fun. It's basically, they're hard to find, I think, but basically you can just take a boat out onto the ocean. Even I think you can do birding off of whale watching trips and see so many cool birds that you would not be able to see it from shore whatsoever. Yeah, and so yes, Catherine got it, guillemots. Yeah, and it's basically got this this blue belt across its chest. It's the females only that have the red colored belt across its chest. And this is actually a really good example of birds where you have this role reversal, this gender role reversal, I guess you could say, where, oh, it's actually the females that are more colorful than the males. So I love kingfishers for that. Oh, Erin Riffle, I think, okay, yeah, is I think writing here which islands you can see puffins on. So that's Rika, Glen Island, Triangle Island. Yeah, Triangle Island is one of those where you really can't get there. I think it's actually not allowed for the public to go there at all. I think only scientists are allowed access, and they need to even, you know, get a permit to actually step onto the island. There's north of Tofino and then the south end of Haida Gwaii. Yeah, so very specific places. And then, oh, Scott, thank you for the compliment. All right, I will go on to the next one. the next set of birds. And yes, these are meant to be tricky, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. ACES1 is saying that in California, I think puffins also are nesting on reserved islands. Yeah, they're really well protected seabirds because there aren't many places where they nest. And so kind of those last islands where they do nest, they are usually well protected. All right. Jess says all Canadian gulls. Oh, Jana and Evelyn, they say ring-billed gull, and that's right. We do have a ring-billed gull on the bottom right. And one easy way to tell that it's a ring-billed gull is this black ring around its beak. So yeah, that's right. Scott says some sort of gulls. Yes, that's right. Yeah. And Western gull, California gull, and juvenile something gull. Yeah. So yeah, these were meant to be tricky, and I just basically put up this slide here to show that sometimes you have to look really carefully at birds to tell what they are. And I think the public generally knows these birds as seagulls, but in reality, there are just so many different kinds of gulls out there that are just kind of go unnoticed, and I think they're underappreciated, I think. But yeah, so we have actually a really good diversity of gulls here. The one on the top left is one that we know pretty well here in the Vancouver area, which is the glaucous-winged gull. And this is a young one. And I'll just say that young gulls are very difficult to identify. Juveniles, even me, someone who's been breeding for many years, I am often intimidated by gull identification, especially the young ones, because it can get pretty confusing. But if you're interested in learning more about gull identification, it's always nice to start out with the adult ones. Yeah, the one on the bottom right is a ring-billed gull. We have a mew gull on the bottom left, which a few of you pointed out. And mew gull is a little bit one of the easier ones because it has such a tiny beak compared to all the other gulls. So that's kind of a nice tip to narrow that one down. And then on the top right, we have California gull, which has this black, the adult has this black spot on the beak as well as this red spot on the beak. Yeah. And yeah, so I will move on now. But even another thing that complicates gull identification is that some of them hybridize. So that's not something I'll get into, but even scientists are kind of confused by gulls because it's not always clear, whether we can put this bird into that species category or that species category. So even scientists are confused by these guys. All right, so I'll move on to the next set. These are Martian pond birds. Oh yeah, and I'll just address ACES1's question. Can gulls crossbreed? And so not all of them. I mean, there are some gull species that will breed and hybridize more readily than others. So for example, one that we'll see a lot on the West Coast is, I believe, Western gull and glaucous-winged gull. Those hybridize a lot. Whereas, yeah, so there are some pairs of species that will breed a lot more easily than crossbreed more easily than others. Okay, cool. So Jana and Evelyn, they say marsh wren. Oh, whoops, apologies, I skipped forward. I meant to be on this slide. Yeah, that's right. So marsh wren on the top left. Song sparrow is on the next slide. Apologies about that. Yeah, we have wood duck on the bottom left. Wood ducks are absolutely beautiful. They're one of the most colorful duck species we have here in North America, and the males just basically have every color of the rainbow on their body. It's really splendid. And you can see actually quite a bit of them in the Vancouver area. Even in some of our local parks like Stanley Park, or I live close to Trout Lake, and I'll see them there as well. Yeah, we have baby mallards. I really enjoyed seeing them this spring. Unfortunately, a lot of them have already grown up to be adults, so they're not as cute anymore. But I really enjoy finding baby birds. They're very adorable. Yeah, ACES1 has identified the one on the top right as pied-billed grebe, and this is also one that often gets mistaken as a duck. But yeah, the pied-billed grebes, they love to dive underwater and catch fish. And I actually have one really close by to my house that I like to observe sometimes. And they're pretty secretive birds, but you can definitely spot them without binoculars. Yeah, and I'll just talk a little bit more about the marsh wren on the top left. Wrens are very small, elusive birds. They like to hide in the bushes a lot. So you'll actually tend to hear them a lot more than you see them. But they are very small. And I've read somewhere actually that they are the loudest bird per square inch of their body, or per cubic inch of their body. That just that basically the amount of noise that they can put out is the biggest for their small size out of all the birds out there, which is a pretty fun fact. They are pretty loud. Oh, and Jas says, lifer, saw wood duck for the first time. Congrats, Jas. All right, and so yeah, apologies. So I skipped over to this slide briefly by accident. Someone already identified the one on the bottom left, which is a song sparrow, which is correct. Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll just give you guys a few more seconds to put in your guesses. Okay, awesome. So yes, so ACES1 says, so I put in this, the bird on the right, it is a red-winged blackbird. I put this one as a little bit of a tricky one because a lot of people know what the male red-winged blackbird looks like. It's this, black plumage bird with red shoulder patches, but female birds are often misidentified because they are so much less colorful than their male counterparts. And so, yeah, a lot of the time I find that people misidentify female red-winged blackbirds as sparrows, which is why I put this one in, because yeah, female birds can sometimes take you by surprise. So that's right. Kudos to you, ACES1, for catching this. This is a female red-winged blackbird. And the one on the top left is a sandpiper. This is a spotted sandpiper, and they're pretty cute. Oftentimes you'll see them, flicking their tail, kind of moving their butt up and down. And they'll do that actually when they're alarmed, when they think that there's a predator close by. But yeah, it looks quite comical actually. And then I'm not sure which one you mean, Jas, by the fantail. I assume that you were referring to the red-winged blackbird. I'm not familiar with fantails at all, actually. I don't know anything about fantails. But yeah, that one's a red-winged blackbird. And then I'll speak a little bit more about the song sparrow, because depending where you are in North America, song sparrows can look quite different. Whether you're in Vancouver or say in Halifax. And yeah, and so there's just a lot of variation within this species. And you can get that sometimes where there's, one species, but it looks different, completely different on opposite sides of the country. Yeah, so the ones on the West Coast are a lot darker than the ones in the East. And that's just one thing to look out for. With red-tailed hawks as well, you have so much variation. So especially if you're traveling like across Canada or across North America, that's one thing to watch out for. And then ACES1 is asking what what kind of red wing do you have? 2 or 3 colors. I think we have there are different, I think, red-winged blackbird subspecies. I think there's like the bicolored subspecies or the tricolor. I'm not actually quite familiar with that. I don't know the answer to that, actually. Apologies. Yeah. Okay, I'll move on to the next one, the next slide. Birds of fields and meadows. I think this is my second last one. Yeah. Also check the time to see how we're doing. Okay. Any guesses? Yeah, okay. So, okay, I'll just give one more minute for people if they want to answer. And again, it's okay if you don't know the full species, even if you have a guess as to what the family might be, then yeah, that's totally fine. Because we're just here to walk through the identification of each of these birds together. I should actually spend a little bit more time on that, talking about the field marks. Yeah, so I'll start with the bird on the bottom right, actually. Yeah, we have some guesses here. Falcon, hawk, osprey, harrier. And so, yeah, I think by looking at this bird, we can tell right away that it's some kind of bird of prey because it has its wings out and it looks like it's soaring through the sky. And that's right, it is a type of bird of prey. And so, yeah, narrowing it down a little bit further, what do we notice about it? In this photo, you don't see a lot. I purposely put it into, took this photo at this angle. So you can't see its face, but one thing that does stand out is its really long, narrow wings and its white butt. And that white butt is actually a really good clue, and it helps us narrow it down. So, oh yeah, I got another guess here, Cooper's hawk. So yeah, you know what, apart from that white butt, the back of this bird actually does look a lot like a Cooper's hawk, but the Cooper's hawk won't have that white patch. Falcon is also a good guess, but falcons tend to have pretty short wings. And the reason they have short wings is because falcons like to zip through trees a lot of the time, or kind of, and that basically having shorter wings gives you more maneuverability. So falcons will tend to have very short pointed wings. So that's a really good guess, but this one is not a hawk, or sorry, it's not a falcon. Hawk is also a really good guess. It's related to a hawk. And yeah, and so basically, yeah, so this white butt tells it all. Just by flipping through a field guide of birds of prey, this one is actually a northern harrier. And another good clue that I could, if I had included the habitat in this photo as well, that would have given another clue. This northern harrier was flying across a marsh, and that's a big giveaway, because you'll find northern harriers almost always, flying over some kind of open field or marsh, looking for prey on the ground. Yeah, and so that's one you can see actually quite a bit in Vancouver, especially if you go just south of Vancouver into the Fraser River estuary area. Yeah, so that was a good one. Yeah, and that's also a good clue, or a good point. Usually the white bump is very visible. You'll usually see it, but yeah, I think habitat is one of the behavior is one of those clues, and just the shape of the wings. When it comes to hawks, falcons, eagles, looking at the shape of the wings is a really good sign. Just kind of paying attention to, okay, how long are the wings? Are they skinny or are they thick? Is this bird beating its wings a lot, or is it soaring? Yeah, so looking at those kinds of characteristics. Okay, Denise says tree swallow on the top left, and that is correct. We have a tree swallow. And yeah, that's another really good one to identify based on behavior. You'll often see swallows yeah, loop-de-looping and doing all these crazy acrobatics in the sky to catch flying insects. And yeah, so narrowing it down to swallows is really easy, especially if you're actually seeing one live. From the photo, it's not all. I think bird identification from photos, I'll also say, is a lot trickier because you're taking away. You don't always get the full information about the bird because in the photo it's not always clear. Okay, what is the habitat? It's not always that obvious, and you also can't tell anything about bird behavior from a photo. So I think, if anything, this photo quiz is tougher than what it would have been in real life. Yeah, Jas is guessing on the bottom left, flycatcher. Not quite a flycatcher. I'd say that's a good guess because flycatchers tend to be very not colorful, just like this bird is, not colorful at all. But the beak can actually, looking at the beak, it's this kind of chunky triangular beak. And so and just the shape of the bird tells me that it is actually, yes, it is a type of sparrow, just like Jana and Evelyn are saying. It is a type of sparrow. And some of the field marks that I'll point out here is you can see this kind of black spot on its chest. So that's a really good thing to look out for when it comes to sparrows, looking to see if it has that black spot on its chest. You can see some fine streaks on its flanks. And another thing that I'll point out here is it's a little bit hard to see in this photo because the lighting was not great. But usually you'll see that there's like a white spot near, or not a yellow spot near its eye. And that can actually help you tell this sparrow apart from other species. So I often look for this yellow spot near its eyebrow. Yeah, and so that makes it a savanna sparrow. Yeah, and this is one that you'll often see in fields and meadows, especially if you're out in the countryside. And then I think as for the top right bird, this is another one of those tricky ones. This is, I'll just flip back quickly. We had, so it's basically in the same family as this marsh wren. There are some similarities that they're both kind of small and brownish. And it's pretty nondescript, to be honest, but this is a house wren. And yeah, one of the easiest ways to tell it apart from other wrens is by voice. That's one thing that I actually rely on quite a bit, is just listening to the birds. And it has this very, very bubbly, energetic song, also very, very loud for its size. Yeah, awesome, cool. Okay, and this is my last set of birds before we move on to resources and how to actually get started with birding. Yeah, so here's some other noteworthy birds. Maybe you know them already. But yeah, put in your guesses. Even if it's to family, that's a great start. Yeah, Scott says 2 hummingbirds. Oh my goodness, okay, I have a flood of messages here. Yes, we have a woodpecker and 2 hummingbirds. Yes. Yeah, Lisa O'Neill is saying flicker, and that's right. So yeah, this bird, the flicker, the reason I put the northern flicker in here is because it's a bird that a lot of my non-birding friends tend to ask me about. I'll often get this question around, oh, I saw this bird and it looks like a woodpecker, but it was on the ground, eating insects. And it's a type of bird that throws off a lot of people because you often expect to see woodpeckers on trees. And perched on basically perched on trees. But this northern flicker, they often behave differently. You'll see them on the ground and they love to eat ants. So by looking at the shape, we can narrow down that, okay, it must be some type of woodpecker, but its behavior can throw you off a little. Yeah, and so yeah, I love these guys. You can see them in Vancouver, and they're a really nice one to look out for. Yeah, and so in terms of the woodpecker, we have, oh my goodness, so many responses. Yeah, so Shelley also got northern flicker. Yeah, so we got a lot of good guesses for those. Now moving on to the hummingbirds. Hummingbirds can be sometimes a little tricky to identify. It's nice because in Vancouver, we're kind of limited. And yeah, we basically only have 2 species of hummingbirds. Sometimes we'll get more. Yeah, but if you go outside of Vancouver and start, going to Manning Park or going to BC's interior, or going south into the United States, then you can get way more diversity in terms of hummingbirds, and they can be sometimes really difficult to identify. But let's look at your guesses. Yeah, and so, yeah, basically the 2 that you can see here are Rufous hummingbird and Anna's hummingbird. And yeah, as you can kind of guess, the one on the bottom right is the Rufous hummingbird. This is the male. The female will still have the Rufous colors, but be a little bit more subdued. And the Anna's hummingbird, this one is not the male. The male will have, the adult male will have like this really nice purplish pinkish throat. But yeah, again, depending on its age and sex, the plumage might look a little different and throw you off. But yeah, awesome guesses. And I'll just read Karen's message. This is so much fun. Thank you. Do you know if there is a ready-made West Coast birds checklist available anywhere that we can print off and try and complete over time? Yes, fun to try and find them all. Yes, I will address that. Right after this, I actually have a bunch of resources for how we can get started with birding. And yeah, Zoosh asked, are we able to access the recording? Yes, I believe Alice mentioned that this will be posted on the internet afterwards. So I think you will be able to have access to it. Yeah, awesome. Okay, I will now talk about these resources. Yeah, so if you don't already, I really recommend getting a physical book. I really appreciate having a physical book. One of the ways I've learned how to identify birds is basically, before going to bed, just flipping through the book and just looking at the different kinds you can see. And having that physical copy, I don't know about you, but it helps me commit to memory some of these birds, especially since there are so many. I do recommend getting a physical book. At least for me, I find it helps me remember a lot more than things that I read on the screen. And yeah, so some of the online resources that I will recommend too are the All About Birds website. That's done by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And yeah, it's a really nice comprehensive guide to all of the species you can see in North America. And it'll even give you information about, fun facts about the bird. It'll give you a range map. So it's a really, really great resource. Yeah, and there's also the Merlin bird identification app. So that's actually a free app. If you have a smartphone, you can download it. And it's also a really great way to help you identify something. I think it'll ask you a series of questions. I think I have this on the next slide. Oh, there we go. It'll ask you a series of questions. When did you see the bird? Where did you see it? What size was it? And what were the main colors? And it'll then give you kind of a short list of what your top suspects might be. And that's a really, really fun way to, especially if you're just starting out, to get a better idea of what the birds are in your area. And before I move on, I'm going to just share my screen and show you 2 other really awesome resources. I had that question about, where can I access a list of the birds that we can see in my area, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Whoops. But I will share there we go. Okay. Hopefully you can see eBird now open. And so eBird is one of my favorite online resources for birds. It's basically a huge database. There are like millions of users worldwide who basically submit their checklists of birds that they're seeing where they live online. And all this information we can access. And so, this is their hotspot map. There's basically maps of all the awesome bird watching places that you can visit close to wherever you live. And so here I have a map of Vancouver, and as you can see, the hotspots in red are usually the more productive ones. So this is a great way to see where the awesome birding hotspots in your area are. And when it comes to getting a list of the bird species that are in your area, you can find that here as well. You can go to even just the process of making a checklist. Here's one of my checklists, actually. When you go to make a checklist, I'll just go to edit species here. eBird automatically generates a list for you of what the species you're likely to see in that given area and at that given time. So kind of here is a list of all the possible birds I can see, and I just fill out with whatever ones I did see. And yeah, so eBird is really, really great, and you can, yeah, I would, if you're interested more in exploring the birds of your area, this is a really awesome place to start and just to play and learn what's being seen in your area. And the other resource that I'll quickly share is right over here. Oops, nope, oops, nope, nope. Okay, there we go. Is iNaturalist. And iNaturalist is a really cool image recognition website where you can take photos of birds or any other, thing in nature, really, and post it online. And then there will be people to help you identify whatever it is that you're looking at. So actually, just this weekend, I found a feather, and I didn't know what it was. Yeah, I wasn't sure what it was. And so I took a photo of it. And I don't know if you guys have any guesses, but someone really nice on the internet came in and helped me identify this bird, which actually turned out to be a spruce grouse, and linked this one photo of the spruce grouse. And you can see that the feather was from its bum. So it was part of this kind of undertail covered feathers. And so this is also a really great website I would recommend, because if you're ever stuck, if you ever get stuck, then just take a photo of your bird and post it online, and there will be lots of people willing to help you. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation now. Okay, you can see my PowerPoint presentation again? Hopefully you can.
See your notes now.
Oh, whoops. Whoops. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Alice. Okay, I'm hoping this is all good now. Okay, so, and before we wrap up, I just wanted, sorry?
Still showing, but it's okay.
Oh, still showing? Okay, no, that's fine. I'll just, apologies for the technical issues. That's fine. I'll just show you this. I'm about to finish anyway, but one thing that I just wanted to share briefly is one thing that I'm working on at Birds Canada is this one conservation issue, which is to build a new project. It's basically like a new shipping terminal. It'll be like an artificial island that's built right on top of really sensitive, essential shorebird habitat. And I just wanted to spread the word about this conservation issue. That, basically 1 million shorebirds pass through this one little area every single year, very close to Vancouver, just south of Vancouver, in found that the project would have adverse effects on several species, including southern resident killer whales, so orcas, as well as barn owls. And so I just wanted to spread the word about this project because there's still time to send a letter to our Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Jonathan Wilkinson. If you're interested in bird conservation and want to help out with this issue, then I can link you up with some more resources to send him a letter and hopefully get this project rejected, because it'll have some pretty, it'll have an environmental impact. And I will just move on. Yeah, and that's pretty much all that I wanted to share with you. If you have any questions for me, this is my email, and you can just shoot me an email, whether it's about bird identification or anything else related to birds. I'd be happy to answer more questions. And if you want to keep in touch and basically we have some social media accounts over here on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the Fraser Delta Important Bird and Biodiversity Area here. So you can just type in Fraser Delta IBA and you can find us on social media. And I run those channels and basically post, conservation updates, fun facts about birds. So I recommend it. It's a great place. So if you have any other questions, then I'd be happy to take them now. I'm going to go back to the chat. Okay, so oh, sorry, I haven't checked it in a while, so I'm just going to scroll back and answer questions. So yeah, okay. I'm glad that people are happy with the resources that I shared. Yes. Yeah. So Lisa asked, what's the name of the project again? That's the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project. And there's lots of information online. And yeah, we are each advocates for wildlife protection and habitat restoration together. I completely agree. And another question asking, are you reaching out to other young people, grade 1s and up, to help support their learning about birds and wildlife? Yes, so Birds Canada, along with other partners, we're always doing these types of webinars and workshops to educate the public about bird conservation and also just the joy of birds and watching them, because it's such a great hobby. Yeah, so we're always doing that. Question from Florence, age 8. Do you travel a lot to see the birds? I have to say there are all sorts of bird watchers out there. There are some birders who just like to watch birds in their backyard. And there are other birders who will, drive 8 hours to see this one bird that someone reported the day before, and it's some rare bird from Europe that came to North America by accident. And they'll just drive overnight at 3 a.m. in the morning just to see this bird. I'm not that dedicated. There are some very, very dedicated birders out there who really want to get birds on their list. We call them listers or twitchers. Yeah, so I would say that I don't chase birds with that much passion, but I love hiking. So I spend a lot of time in the mountains, and I'll bring my binoculars, and I just really love being outside. So I will, I'll have my binoculars with me, and whatever birds I happen to see, I will make a checklist and note them. Yeah, so I will do some traveling, but mostly for hiking. And then I got a message from ACES1 saying that migrant birds travel to see you, and that is absolutely right. Is there an app that's a little more detailed for bird identification when you don't have a picture? Example, you can specify that the bill is a specific shape or something like that, or does it come with experience and learning about them? I'd say, unfortunately, there are limitations. It is difficult to get photos of birds because oftentimes they will be far away. If you are getting into birding, I do recommend getting a pair of binoculars. You can even get some fairly cheap ones. I think my first pair of binoculars was about $100, And I mean, depending on your budget, that might be feasible or not. But even $100 pair of binoculars is great. It helps you so much, and that's when my birding really took off, because it really is hard to identify them without having a pair. So even just having, you know, a small pair or even an inexpensive pair goes a long way. So that's the first thing that I'll say. But yeah, it is tricky to get a photo, especially if you only have like a phone camera. It's not always possible. Merlin is the only app that I can really think of where you can just put in the information and it'll generate ideas for what the bird could be without a photo. I can't think of any more detailed ones. I would have to say that it is through experience, by kind of getting to know the bird families. And that's, I think, the only way to really truly be able to start narrowing it down on your own. Yeah, and that's in part why I recommend getting a physical guide, because that way, you know, all the birds are in one place and you can just kind of flip through. And that is honestly how I started, just flipping. You know, if there's a bird that I didn't know, I would literally flip through the whole book, like 400 pages, and you know, to try and figure out what it is. And then with experience, you get faster at it. And then, are there specific points about ethical birding, like being? Let me just check the time for a second. Okay, we have 4 more minutes, so I'll just take this this question, and if there's any others, then I can maybe quickly answer them. Are there specific points about ethical birding, like being careful about watching them so that you are not also intervening with their habitats? Yes. So birders do have an impact. They do have an impact on the environment. And for example, where I come from in Ontario, we have this one park called Point Pelee Provincial Park. And a lot of people know it as, or sorry, National Park. And a lot of people know it as, you know, the warbler capital of North America, because in the spring, you just get so many migrants passing through there, in part because of the geography. The geography just makes it a really good place where the migrant birds just funnel right through. And yeah, because it's such a, it's a rare, you can find, it's a rare habitat there. And because of that, you have to be really careful about, you know, not going off trail. The park is fairly small, and in the spring can attract hundreds or even thousands of birders all at once. Like the park becomes overrun in May, and yeah, that I think it does have an effect on the birds. And so oftentimes, you know, it's really easy for habitat to get trampled sometimes. And when there's so little of it, then it doesn't give the birds very much. So that's kind of one way. Sometimes, you know, pishing, birders do this one thing where they, you know, can make this one sound that goes like this. And if you, I actually recommend trying it. If you are, I would say, I would recommend trying it maybe not during the breeding season, because during the breeding season, it can really agitate birds. And, you know, they'll think you're a predator and they'll come and investigate and try and see, you know, what you are, who you are. And, you know, it's basically this mobbing behavior that birds will have in response. But again, when birds are in the breeding season, you know, trying to nest, trying to feed their babies and trying to help their babies survive and make it to adulthood, then it can be a huge disruption to their lives and their lively. Yeah, and yeah, so that can have an effect. Yeah, and I guess I could go on and on, especially there tend to be some more sensitive species such as owls that are very, very sensitive to disturbance. So when it comes to birds like owls, you know, there are certain species on eBird that you actually won't be able to get information for. And that's basically to protect the birds so that, you know, to keep their locations a secret so that you don't have swarms of people just going there to watch them and potentially scaring them off and eventually killing them, even if it's unintentional. But yeah, anyway, I could go on and on about ethics, but I'll leave it at that. I just quickly read these last comments. Do this one songs. merit another webinar. Oh yeah, Leanne has been to Point Peely. Yeah, lots of monarchs. And how would you deal with people on trails who don't keep their dogs on leash when they should? True. It's hard to know how much to pick battles with people. Yeah, I just gently suggest it. It's a tough thing to enforce. You know, people tend to rebel if you are too strict about things and seem too bossy about things. So I don't know. I tend to bring it up whenever I can. Yeah, it's a tough thing to enforce. That's for sure. With dogs off leash, perhaps advising that there are coyotes in the area and that it is sensitive breeding habitat. Yeah, I agree, especially when it's a place like the Fraser River estuary where there are a lot of really sensitive breeding birds, especially nesting on the ground. That's when I think I'll be a little pushier. And I think that's time. Alice, do you have any things that you want to say to wrap up?
Yeah, I have some closing comments, but first of all, thank you, Carolyn. I think the enthusiasm in the comment section speaks for itself. You know, that was wonderful. I think everyone learned a lot, and you know, even as an experienced birder myself, like I always love just like nerding out about identification. So yeah, that was wonderful, and yeah, thank you everyone for coming to this webinar as well. We'd love to see you again at a future event. You know, make sure to follow us on social media at Maplewood Flats, or check out our Eventbrite page, which I will be linking in the comments. And we would also really appreciate, you know, your support for our online events. So if you can, you know, we would be really grateful if you could make a donation to Wild Bird Trust. Again, I will also be linking that in the comments. And yeah, other than that, I think, yeah, that was great. I hoped everyone enjoyed, and yeah, take care, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, that was great.